You may have heard we're in an election year. 2 decades ago, during the Bill Clinton campaign against George H.W. Bush, strategist James Carville coined a phrase which has entered the lexicon of American political discourse. It's the economy, stupid. He was right. The early 90s recession before the Silicon Valley dot-com boom was on everyone's mind. Americans were ready for a change. They were worried about industry and worried about unemployment, which peaked in June of that year at 7.8%. That's not far off from overall unemployment now, though it's still double digits for Black and Latinx people. People back then put the economy first. People often do. And that's a big reason why Governor Hogan, I suspect, has moved to phase 3 of reopening Maryland, and why numerous governors have refused to close businesses, ban large gatherings, or mandate mask wearing. Nearly 200,000 American deaths and growing numbers of cases or stubbornly high plateaus in numerous states. It's the economy, stupid. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, writing back in July on the balance between political and moral decisions, said what was beautiful about the global response to COVID-19 was that virtually every nation in the world put moral considerations ahead of political ones until the danger began to recede. He didn't name any specific exceptions to that statement. What makes the American failure to adequately address COVID so devastating is that we have demonstrated not simply our preference for making money over other political issues. We've shown, at least some of us have shown, our preference for saving the economy over saving lives. But that's not what Jewish tradition teaches. Yes, Torah and Halakha are aware that the world is imperfect, that ownership and commerce invariably fosters both economic success and failure. And we want people to be able to earn a living. We want people to be able to put food on their table. But Judaism's pragmatism has limits. The whole community is worthy of blessing, of having their basic needs met. Lives matter to the Jewish tradition. That's why our Parsha begins with a renewal of the covenant. And guess who is included in that moment? Well, basically everyone. Atem Nitzavim-Vayelech kulchem lifnei Hashem Elohechem. You stand this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, your tribal heads, your elders, and your officials, all the men of Israel, your children, your wives, even the stranger within your camp, from woodchopper to water drawer, to enter into the covenant with the Lord your God. The community gathers, just as with the theophany at Sinai, where revelation was democratized, so too the whole congregation of Israel stands to affirm their sacred covenant. And how accessible are these teachings that are meant to reinforce our collective thriving? Lo bashamayim hi, it is not in the heavens that you should say, who among you can go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it? Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross? No, the thing is very close to you. Beficha ulvavecha lasoto, in your mouth, in your heart to observe it. And then, my friends, Torah does something very interesting. It sets up a choice. Re'eh natati lefanecha hayom et hachayim ve'et hatov, ve'et hamavet ve'et hara. See, I set before you this day, not life and death. We're going to hear that in just a little bit. But here it says, life and good, which Ibn Ezra understands to mean good being prosperity, that is, success. And what's opposite life and prosperity? Death and adversity. Life and success are not adversaries. They are inextricably bound to one another. Rashi, writing a little bit earlier than Ibn Ezra, comments the one is dependent on the other. In other words, to prosper at the expense of life is no prosperity. And how do we know which choice we are to make? Life and prosperity on one hand, or adversity and death? Well, the Parsha is very clear about that. I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day. I have put before you life and death, blessing and curse. Uvacharta b'chayim, choose life, if you and your offspring would live. Choose life. It's not the economy. It's life, stupid. Choose life, says Torah, and you shall have success. Success or prosperity at the expense of life is not an option. And how do we choose life? What does that look like? Parashat Nitzavim concludes by loving the Lord your God, heeding God's commandments, and holding fast to Hashem. For thereby you shall have life and shall long endure upon the soil that the Lord swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give to them. Choosing life is about loving God, which is to say, it's about believing in something greater than the money we earn. This Shabbat marks 19 years since 9/11/2001. As I said, there have been nearly 200,000 American lives lost to COVID-19, but there was a time when nearly 3,000 lives felt like an extraordinary number. That dark day, that beautiful Tuesday in New York saw the choice of adversity and death. But we also witnessed American courage, resilience, and love in New York, in Washington, D.C., in the skies above Pennsylvania. Take a moment to remember where you were, what you did, who you held. I'm guessing many of us recall that day well. And those of you who are not yet born have come into a world severely altered by those events 19 years ago. And of course, there are stories of bravery and life-affirming heroism. On a day when hijackers chose death for themselves and thousands of others chose life. Here are briefly just two of those stories. Just a few minutes after United Airlines Flight 175 struck the South Tower of the World Trade Center, 24-year-old Wellis Crowther called his mother and calmly left a voicemail. "Mom, this is Wellis. I want you to know that I'm okay." Crowther was an equities trader at Sandler O'Neill and Partners on the 104th floor. But after that call, the man who was a volunteer firefighter in his teens made his way down to the 78th floor sky lobby and became a hero to strangers known only as the man in the red bandana. Amid the smoke, chaos, and debris, Crowther helped injured and disoriented office workers to safety, risking his own life in the process. Though they couldn't see much through the haze, those he saved recalled a tall figure wearing a red bandana to shield his lungs and mouth. He had come down to the 78th floor sky lobby, an alcove of the building, with express elevators meant to speed up trips to the ground floor. In what's been described as a strong, authoritative voice, Crowther directed survivors to the stairway and encouraged them to help others while he carried an injured woman on his back. After bringing her 15 floors down to safety, he made his way back up to help others. Everyone who can stand now. Atem Nitzavim. Crowther told survivors while directing them to a stairway exit, "If you can help others, do so." He's definitely my guardian angel, no ifs, ands, or buts, because without him, we would be sitting there waiting until the building came down, survivor Ling Yun told CNN. Crowther is credited with saving at least a dozen people that day. His body was later recovered alongside firefighters in a stairwell heading back up the tower. Rick Rescorla earned the Silver Star and other awards during his service in Vietnam. He would often sing to his men to calm them down while under fire, using songs of his youth while growing up in the United Kingdom. Many more in the South Tower would hear his songs on September 11th, where Rescorla was working as head of corporate security for Morgan Stanley. When American Flight 11 hit the tower next to him, Port Authority ordered Rescorla to keep his employees at their desks. Rescorla refused. Everything above where that plane hit is going to collapse, and it's going to take the whole building with it. Rescorla, who had frequently warned the Port Authority and his company about the World Trade Center's security weaknesses, had already issued the order to evacuate. He had made Morgan Stanley employees practice emergency drills for years, and it paid off that day. Just 16 minutes after the first plane hit the opposite tower, more than 2,700 employees and visitors were out when the second plane hit their building. During the evacuation, Rescorla calmly reassured people, singing "God Bless America" and "Men of Harlech" over a bullhorn as they walked down the stairs. During the evacuation, Rescorla called his wife. According to the New Yorker, he said, "Stop crying. I have to get these people out safely. If something should happen to me, I want you to know I've never been happier. You made my life." Rescorla was last seen on the 10th floor of the South Tower, heading upward to look for stragglers. His body was never found. Two stories from 19 years ago yesterday. Two people who risked and then sacrificed their lives so that many others could live. They chose life. They chose to stand with others until they could stand no more. These days, there are too many insisting, I think, on their own happiness, their own liberty. They're willing to risk the lives of others for their own prosperity. Working is important, and commerce, as with all things in life, comes with some risk. But the Torah's default is never the economy at the expense of the people. Some people lately seem to be making the argument that anyone who isn't willing to save his own skin is a sucker, that compromise is foolish and compassion is stupid. But worshiping the economy, that's stupid. Loving and revering life, that's brave. Atem Nitzavim. Today we stand on the threshold of another year after the worst terrorist attack on American soil. May the memories of those who lost their lives that day be for a blessing. And may we, as a token of our remembrance of that day, continue to choose love, empathy, and life. Shabbat Shalom.